This recording will cover Chapter 12 in your textbook, Transition to Employment, and those are the authors. So in Chapter 11, we talked about transition to post-secondary education. So now we're going to look at transitioning to employment. So here are the objectives, and here's the chapter organizer, the key concept for this one. How can we support students in identifying and achieving various employment outcomes? And again, that will look different for different students. So just kind of keep that in mind, okay? So this is a little disheartening. 2 out of 3 people with disabilities are not employed, and unfortunately that has changed very little since the 1980s. So that's really, I don't know, kind of eye-opening. I think, we want students, individuals with disabilities, whatever they're capable of, let them be employed. Let's let them make a salary. Let's let them be around other people, right? So that's something that hopefully, I will see change in the next, 10 years. This Vocational Options for Individuals with Disabilities in a Pre-Americans with Disabilities Act era, I don't know what that is. I'm not even going to lie. So I looked it up. I Googled it. I just copied that phrase. And it took me to a bunch of different sites that didn't really apply, but I did find this one and I thought it was kind of interesting. You don't have to do anything with this, of course. It's just for your reference. It is accredited schoolsonline.org vocational-trade-school/people with disabilities / right? So just in case you want to look it up. So it talks a little bit about the difference between talks a little bit about vocational schools and trade schools, and that's not what I wanted. As per normal with me, I just lied to y'all. This was actually what I really wanted to show you. It's still accredited schools, accreditedschoolsonline.org, vocational trade schools. So just in case you're kind of wondering, well, what are vocational and trade schools? This just kind of talks about what they are. Vocation or trade requires specialized hands-on training. Some schools use these terms interchangeably. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about. You may have heard it vocational school, or you may have heard it trade school. A lot of people kind of say, vocational trade, whatever. So just wanted to let you know it's kind of the same thing. Some quick facts about vocational schools. In 2009, people who focus on career and technical education, CTE, we'll talk about that in a minute, courses in high school earned higher median annual salaries than those who did not. So that's really something to think about, for our students with disabilities. Well, maybe we can kind of steer them to this career and technical education, as opposed to something else. There are some online programs listed, of course, but then there's some benefits of a trade-focused school and some popular vocational programs. It might be beauty school or culinary school or HVAC training or medical assistant or something like this. Somewhere they mentioned dental hygienist or a landscape architect, I think. And it just kind of tells you a little bit about the differences in vocational schools and 4-year colleges. So, vocational specific trade focused coursework for occupations such as an ultrasound tech or an airplane mechanic, whereas a 4-year is more, English, history, concentration, stuff like that. All right, so that's just there in case you want to Google that phrase on this slide, because really I was like, well, it's not listed in the in the textbook. So I was like, let me just Google that and see what it is. So anyway, little has changed. With employment, transitioning to employment, there is a continuum of employment for individuals with disabilities, kind of segregated, very segregated, sheltered, all the way to competitive employment in community-based businesses. We need to find whatever is right for that particular student. So customized employment services, those have really been promoted kind of lately, increased focus on consumer choice, stuff like that. Okay, so then 60s and 70s, we had adult day programs, also sheltered workshops. So adult day programs included, a lot of daily living activities, field trips, going to the grocery store, stuff like that. And sheltered workshops specialized in work training and provided individual environments to habilitate. That used to be the word. Individuals with disabilities. Don't get me started on that, but that's okay. So the outcomes, people didn't really move out of those segregated settings to community employments. So then that's kind of where this push for the continuum of services came along. There's also a continuum of services, in K-12 in terms of placements. And I think we talked about that when we talked about least restrictive environment. So this is a little bit, it's another continuum of services. Okay. So just kind of keep in mind that there are, separate ones for kind of K-12 students and then for post-secondary. Okay, so then there's transitional employment. So this is kind of 1990s. Employment support providers, rehab counselors, provide specialized help on job sites. There will be limited follow-up and then work with employer to identify support needs and secure accommodations at job sites. Okay, then there's supported employment. So this is kind of the more competitive work in an integrated work setting or employment in integrated work settings in which individuals are working towards competitive employment. Very wordy, I know, again, from the publishers, not me. With ongoing support services for individuals with the most significant disabilities. So this was based on place and train, let's place them first and then train them later. Or where it should be train them first and then place them somewhere where they could generalize those, but also benefit from training in the environment in which they will work. So think about where we're going to place them, kind of that backward planning, and train them based on that. Okay, then some emerging options, customized employment, as I just mentioned, looking at individual determination of the strengths, needs, interests of individuals with disabilities. Again, so really individualized, right? Really, hey, individual student, what do you want? In this chapter, there are a few case studies, of course. I think they're a little smaller in this chapter. There's Tim on page 284. Well, that's the hard copy book. I'm assuming it's the same in the e-text, but it might be a page or two off. But, Tim talks about, let me see if I can get to Tim really quickly. Let's see, Tim. Oh, I jumped ahead of myself because I really want to show you all that. Tim said that, hold on, I'm getting back to Tim. Hold on. All right, so here's Tim. Yes, I know it's a little cut off. Just hold on. So here's his current school year assessments. And then he said that, he likes remodeling houses. He likes video games. His dad said, yeah, he does know a lot about the construction business, but it makes him a little slow because he really wants to be careful. I feel you, Tim, because that's how I am when I write. And then mom says, we think he could live in an apartment or house by himself. He might take some support at the start. So then Tim also says, well, hey, here's what I'd like to participate in. I'm however old he is, 19 years old. Here's some things that he wants to do. Summary of performance. Let me see if it goes on. Okay, here's the summary of performance for Tim. Sometimes it's hard for me to move the little box thing. Don't ask why. So, some present levels and then essential accommodations, modifications, and or assistive technology utilized in high school and why. So why are these accommodations needed? So we can kind of look forward and say, okay, he needs these accommodations now. What might he need as he gets away from high school and transitions to the workforce? Okay, here's where your textbook talks about career and technical education on page 287. It's, really important. And I did like, hold on one moment, please. All right. We'll get back to it. Don't worry. And then I will also show you page 289 as well. I just didn't want to forget to show you that. So some more emerging outcomes, competitive employment with supports. So providing that support, but giving them competitive employment. Job clubs, mentoring, all of these things are emerging options. So some more resources, agency mediated supports, vocational rehab programs, mental health programs, employment and training programs, stuff like that, community health service programs, job coach assistance, assistive technology, all of those things are resources for customizing employment. Government mediated support, those work incentives, I'm not even going to try. It's one of those days. Consumer, family, community, mediated supports, personal care attendant, peer mentors, which is great. Friends, neighbors, helping out for transportation. Okay, some business mediated supports. So maybe looking at, can we restructure this job to support this individual with this disability a little better? Or can we provide some accommodations, whether it's environmental, assistive tech, task modification, schedule modification, coworker mentoring, stuff like that. All right, so Voc Rehab Agencies also are typically called VR, or Vocational Rehabilitation, Voc Rehab, VR, lots of acronyms, of course. So each state does have a VR agency. Primary purpose is employment, and has suggested that students be referred within 2 years of graduation. And the services can start earlier if needed. Thinking about like going back to Thomas, right? Way back to Thomas. Maybe starting his services in 9th grade or something like that, to get him ready for job placement, occupational school, on the job training, stuff like that. Okay, so there are also visual impairment rehab programs, VI. So these programs might be a part of VR agencies, or they might be different. All right, let me go back really quickly to the textbook. So this is page, not this, what I want to show you is page 289. Once it gets there. Okay, so this is figure 12-2. So take a look at this if you have a moment. Again, it's on page 289. So this is a continuum of vocational placement options for students with disabilities. So here's our student. We do an age-appropriate vocational evaluation, right? Then the IEP team looks at it and says, okay, let's select an appropriate vocational education option based on the evaluation information. So option 1, regular vocational education, just kind of typical, regular, nothing special, nothing different. Then for options 2, 3, and 4, this would be an IEP would be required specifically for these options. All right, so regular vocational education with an adjusted program. This one was supplemental aids and or specialized supportive personnel. And this one is specialized vocational education. So this one, this option 1 really leads to kind of being independently employed, kind of working independently, employment and structured. So these ones are a little more supported, and also needs these IEPs. And going back to what I said in chapter 11, the authors of the textbook are from Ohio, and I think one's from Louisville. So that's why a lot of stuff referenced is Ohio. All right, so that's that. So look at page 289. I think it might be helpful for you all to see that. All right, so let me move my little box again. Okay, we're going to stay right here and not leave this site, not leave the screens. There are also developmental disabilities agencies. For this, eligibility requires a disability onset before the age of 22, and then substantial impairments in 3 of these 7 life activities. So language, independent living, economic self-sufficiency, self-direction, self-care, learning, and mobility. Okay, and here's how he talks about the funding. Let's see what's next. Mental health agencies. We all know how important mental health agencies and support are for, quote unquote, again, typical people. Think about if you're an individual with a disability, especially a high school student or a college student. We really need to remind them and point them in the direction of mental health agencies and resources. Okay, so there's some mental health employment service delivery options. Again, might be provided through VR, may create business to employ individuals with mental illness. I know there's a place up in Penn State that, unfortunately it happened after I left, but they created a cafe, and it's run by individuals, college age individuals with, not mental illness, my bad. They have intellectual disabilities, but still, these are great opportunities for those individuals. There's the State Bureau of Employment Statistics. This just kind of has offices for tracking available jobs, centralized advertising, referrals, stuff like that. No eligibility requirements. There's also one-stop career centers, one-stop shops, right? It's part of the Workforce Investment Act, so you can look into that. I have a couple more slides in a few more seconds. Social welfare, social entitlements, and work incentives. There's SSDI, if you've ever heard of that. It stands for Social Security Disability Insurance. Okay, and then there's also SSI, Supplemental Security Insurance. So this is, Medicaid is often tied to this. I know a lot of the students with whom I used to work at the K-5 level, I know their families would receive SSI. We also want to think about model employment practices, so job design, job carving, person-centered job selection, going back to that phrase, person-centered. So thinking about, what is ideal for that student. And then natural supports and conclusion. Okay, that's it for chapter 12. I know that was fast.